Deep within the rugged wilderness of the Cascade Mountains, Forest Ranger Samantha Reed was making her way through a dense pine forest when she noticed something extraordinary. A small bobcat kit, barely large enough to survive on its own, was trailing behind her at a careful distance. At first, she thought the young predator was simply curious about the human intruder in its territory, but then she caught a glimpse of its eyes, wide, desperate, and filled with an unmistakable plea for help. When Samantha finally understood why the tiny bobcat was shadowing her every move, she felt her heart shatter. Because the kit wasn't merely curious or lost, it was leading her somewhere that would change everything she thought she knew about these elusive creatures. The crisp autumn air filled Samantha's lungs as she adjusted the straps of her heavy backpack. Bright orange and red leaves crunched beneath her worn hiking boots, while she documented the seasonal changes in this remote section of the national forest. She had been a ranger in these mountains for nearly a decade, patrolling the expansive backcountry and monitoring the delicate ecosystem that thrived far from human intervention. The days were growing shorter, and the first frost had already painted the forest floor in crystalline patterns each morning. It was her favorite time of year, but also the most challenging for the mountain's wildlife as they prepared for the harsh winter ahead. Samantha paused to mark a damaged tree on her GPS unit, likely the work of a bear marking its territory, when she first sensed the peculiar feeling of being watched. Years of wilderness experience had honed her awareness to a knife's edge. Her movement slowed as she carefully scanned the surrounding trees, expecting to spot a deer or perhaps even a black bear at a safe distance. Instead, her eyes locked onto something entirely unexpected, partially hidden behind a fallen log about. 30 yards away, the tiny bobcat kit peered back at her with startling intensity. Its distinctive tufted ears were perked forward in alert concentration, its spotted tawny coat providing perfect camouflage against the forest floor. Samantha froze, barely breathing. Encountering any wild bobcat was rare enough. They were masters of stealth and avoidance, but finding a kit alone was virtually unheard of. "Well, hello there," she whispered, remaining perfectly still. The kit's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but it didn't retreat. In fact, it seemed to be studying her with unnerving focus for such a young animal. Samantha's training kicked in immediately. Don't approach, don't intervene. Wild animals, especially young ones, were often not truly abandoned. The mother could be hunting nearby, and human interference might do more harm than good. She decided to continue her patrol route, giving the kit a wide berth to avoid disturbing whatever natural situation was unfolding. Yet as she moved away, something extraordinary happened. The bobcat kit emerged fully from behind the log and began to follow her. Not aggressively, not playfully, but with deliberate, cautious steps. Samantha stopped again, perplexed. The kit stopped too, maintaining that careful distance, its eyes never leaving her face. "You should be heading back to your mother, little one," she said softly, though she knew the words meant nothing to the wild animal. Bobcat mothers were fiercely protective of their young, teaching them to hunt and survive until they were approximately 9 months old. This kit couldn't be more than 4 or 5 months old, far too young to be venturing out alone. Samantha consulted her map, decided to complete her loop back to the ranger station, and began walking again. The kit followed. When she stopped, it stopped. When she changed direction slightly, it adjusted its course accordingly. This wasn't random animal behavior. The bobcat was deliberately tracking her. After 20 minutes of this unusual dance, through the forest, Samantha's concern deepened. Something was wrong, very wrong. She studied the kit more carefully as it navigated over a fallen branch. Its movements were steady but labored. Though bobcats were naturally lean predators, this one appeared underweight, its ribs faintly visible beneath its spotted coat, And there was something else, a slight favoring of its right front paw, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for signs of distress. The realization hit Samantha with unexpected force. The kit was hungry, possibly injured, and for some reason it had chosen to approach a human rather than flee. In her years as a ranger, she had never seen such behavior from a bobcat. Among the most solitary and human-averse predators in the forest, a painful question formed in her mind: where was its mother? Bobcat kits stayed with their mothers for protection and hunting lessons until they were nearly grown. For this young one to approach a human, something catastrophic must have happened to disrupt that natural bond. Samantha felt a tightening in her chest as she considered the possibilities, none of them good. The kit stopped again, watching her with those intense amber eyes that seemed to hold knowledge beyond its young age. Then it did something that sent a chill down Samantha's spine. It let out a sound, not the typical bobcat snarl or hiss, but a soft, almost mewling cry. It was a sound of distress, of need. And then, to Samantha's astonishment, the kit turned and took several steps in a new direction before stopping to look back at her. The message couldn't have been clearer if the wild animal had spoken human words. "Follow me." Samantha hesitated, years of wildlife management training battling with her instincts. The standard protocol was clear: minimize intervention with wildlife, especially predator species. Bobcats weren't endangered in this region, but they were an essential part of the ecosystem, controlling rabbit and rodent populations. The proper procedure would be to document the sighting, report the unusual behavior, and perhaps arrange for wildlife specialists to assess the situation. But as the kit looked back at her again, taking a few more deliberate steps and then waiting, Samantha felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just unusual behavior, this was communication. The kit wasn't following her anymore, it was asking her to follow it. She clicked on her radio, her voice steady despite the adrenaline now coursing through her veins. "Base, this is Ranger Reed checking in from Sector 7. I'm tracking a juvenile bobcat showing abnormal behavior, possible orphaned kit. I'm going to maintain observation and report back." The radio crackled with her supervisor's concerned response. "Copy that, Reed. Be careful. Do you need backup?" Samantha watched as the kit took a few more steps away from her, then turned again, waiting. Those eyes, so wild yet somehow pleading, made her decision for her. "Negative on the backup for now," she replied. "Just logging my position and movement. I'll check in every 15 minutes. With that, Samantha took a deep breath and nodded toward the waiting bobcat. "All right, little one," she said quietly. "Show me what's so important." The kit blinked once, as if in acknowledgement, then turned and began to lead the way deeper into the forest, away from the marked trails and into the heart of the wilderness. Samantha adjusted her pack, checked her GPS to mark her starting position, and followed, stepping into a mystery that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the wild creatures she had dedicated her life to protecting. Samantha Reed had spent the last 8 years of her life as a forest ranger in the Cascade Mountains, ever since she'd returned from her 3rd tour of duty overseas. The transition from military service to forest conservation had been her salvation, a way to heal from the chaos of war while still serving a greater purpose. At 34, she had built a reputation among her colleagues as meticulous, level-headed, and deeply committed to protecting the wilderness she now called home. The Cascade Range had become her sanctuary, a place where the predictable rhythms of nature had helped steady her when nightmares of her deployment still haunted her sleep. Her ranger station was a modest outpost at the edge of one of the most remote sections of the national forest, staffed by just 3 full-time rangers and seasonal support during the summer months. Now, in mid-October, Samantha often patrolled alone, which suited her preference for solitude. The nearest town, Pinecrest, was a 40-minute drive down winding mountain roads, close enough for supplies, but far enough to maintain the peaceful isolation she cherished. As she followed the Bobcat kit deeper into the forest, Samantha's mind cycled through her extensive training. Bobcats typically lived solitary lives after leaving their mothers, establishing territories of up to 40 square miles depending on prey availability. Females were fiercely maternal, teaching their young to hunt through careful instruction and practice. Kits normally stayed with their mothers for 9 months, sometimes even longer during particularly harsh seasons. For this young kit to be alone and seeking human help violated everything she knew about bobcat behavior. She carefully observed its movements as they traveled, noting how it paused frequently to ensure she was still following. Despite its evident distress, the kit moved with the natural grace of its species, navigating the uneven terrain with measured steps. Occasionally it would stop, ears swiveling, to catch sounds beyond human perception before continuing its determined journey. Samantha kept a careful distance, respecting the wild animal's space while maintaining visual contact. She documented their path on her GPS and made voice notes about the kit's condition on her handheld recorder. Professional habits never quite left her, even in this extraordinary situation. The subject appears to be approximately 4 to 5 months old male bobcat kit. She spoke quietly into the recorder, showing signs of minor malnourishment and possible injury to right forelimb. Behavior extremely atypical, deliberate human interaction rather than avoidance. Currently leading me northwest through old-growth section, away from established trails. The forest grew denser as they moved away from the patrol routes, massive Douglas firs and western hemlocks creating a cathedral-like canopy above. Shafts of golden afternoon light penetrated the branches, illuminating patches of forest floor covered in emerald moss and scattered mushrooms. In any other circumstance, Samantha would have paused to appreciate the pristine beauty, but now her focus remained fixed on the small predator guiding her through the wilderness. After about 20 minutes of steady travel, the kit's pace slowed. Its ears flattened slightly, body language shifting from determined to cautious. Samantha immediately picked up on the change, her own senses heightening in response. Something was different about this part of the forest. She scanned the area, carefully, noting they had entered a section that had been partially affected by a lightning strike fire 2 seasons ago. The understory was more open here, with young saplings reaching toward the light created by fallen giants. Blackened trunks stood like silent sentinels among the new growth, nature's cycle of destruction and renewal on display. The kit looked back at her again, those amber eyes holding hers with unsettling intelligence before it moved forward with even greater care. Samantha followed, her boots silent on the soft forest floor. Years of moving through combat zones had taught her how to navigate any terrain with minimal sound, a skill that had transferred seamlessly to her work as a ranger. Her radio crackled, breaking the silence. "Reed, this is base. Checking in for your 15-minute mark. What's your status?" The kit froze at the sudden noise, its entire body tensing. Samantha quickly lowered the volume and responded, keeping her voice calm and quiet. "Base, Reed here. Still with the juvenile bobcat. Position?" She checked her GPS quickly. "Approximately 2 miles northwest of marker 22 in the burn recovery zone. Subject is continuing to display unusual behavior, but appears non-aggressive. Will continue observation." "Copy that, Reed. Wildlife Division has been notified. They're advising minimal intervention unless the animal appears critically distressed." "Understood, base. Read out." Samantha returned the radio to her belt and looked up to find the kit watching her, head tilted slightly as if trying to understand the strange human communication. Despite the gravity of the situation, she couldn't help but smile at the expression, so reminiscent of curiosity. "Just checking in, little one," she said softly. "We need to let them know where we are." As if understanding her explanation, the kit turned and continued forward, its movement now taking on a more urgent quality. Samantha followed, increasingly certain they were approaching whatever destination the young bobcat was so determined to reach. The terrain began to slope downward, leading toward what Samantha recognized as a ravine carved by one of the smaller, seasonal creeks. During spring runoff, these waterways could become dangerous torrents, but in autumn they typically reduced to gentle streams or dried up entirely, leaving rocky channels through the forest floor. The kit paused at the edge of the descent, seeming to gather its strength before carefully picking its way down the steep embankment. Samantha followed with practiced ease, using exposed tree roots as natural handholds on the incline. The ravine was deeper than it had appeared from above, with walls rising nearly 15 feet on either side. At the bottom, a thin ribbon of water still flowed, evidence that this particular creek was spring-fed rather than dependent on rainfall alone. The atmosphere changed in the ravine, cooler, damper, with the gentle sound of water creating a backdrop to their movements. Ferns and moisture-loving plants grew in abundance here, creating a lush green corridor along the creek bed. The Bobcat kit moved with new purpose now, following the watercourse with determined steps. Samantha felt a growing tension in her chest, an inexplicable certainty that they were approaching something significant. The kit's body language had shifted again, more urgent, more distressed. It looked back at her more frequently now, those extraordinary eyes seeming to plead for her to hurry. "I'm right behind you," she assured it, though she knew the words themselves meant nothing to the wild animal. It was her tone, steady and calm, that seemed to give the kit confidence to continue. They rounded a bend in the ravine where a massive fallen cedar had created a natural bridge across the small canyon. And there, in the shadowed space beneath the log, Samantha saw what the Bobcat kit had been so desperately trying to show her. The sight stopped her cold, a sharp inhale catching in her throat as the full understanding of the kit's unusual behavior finally became devastatingly clear. Beneath the massive fallen cedar, partially concealed by ferns and shadow, lay an adult, female bobcat. Even from several yards away, Samantha could see she was alive, her sides rising and falling with shallow, labored breaths, but severely injured. The kit darted forward, rushing to his mother's side with a heartbreaking mew of recognition. He nuzzled her face, his tiny body pressed against hers in a desperate attempt to rouse her. Samantha approached cautiously, keeping her movements slow and deliberate to avoid startling either animal. As she drew closer, the extent of the mother, Bobcat's condition became painfully clear. Her right hind leg was caught in the metal jaws of an illegal trap, the cruel device clamped just above her ankle. Dried blood darkened the fur around the wound, and Samantha could see signs of infection beginning to set in. The bobcat's normally muscular body showed clear evidence of dehydration and starvation. She had likely been trapped for days, unable to hunt or reach water. "Oh God," Samantha whispered, a wave of anger and sorrow washing over her. Trapping was strictly prohibited in this protected part of the national forest. This wasn't a misplaced research trap or wildlife management tool. The rusty tooth design was unmistakably the work of poachers, likely after the bobcat's valuable pelt. The female's eyes opened at Samantha's approach, wild, golden, and filled with a mixture of fear and exhaustion. Unlike her kit, the mother's instinctive reaction to a human was alarm. She tried to rise, a low growl rumbling in her throat, but collapsed back immediately, too weak to mount even a token defense. The Kit positioned himself between his mother and Samantha, his small body tensed as if ready to protect her despite his size. "It's okay," Samantha said in the same calm, quiet voice she had used with the Kit throughout their journey. "I'm going to help you." She knelt at a safe distance, assessing the situation with the methodical clarity that had served her well both in military operations and wildlife emergencies. The mother bobcat needed immediate medical attention. The trap had caused significant tissue damage, and the resulting immobility had left her dangerously weakened. Yet approaching a wounded wild predator, even one as small as a bobcat, carried serious risks. Under normal circumstances, Samantha would have called for a wildlife specialist with tranquilizer equipment before attempting any intervention. But as she observed the labored breathing and the glazed quality beginning to cloud the bobcat's eyes, she knew time was running short. This animal might not survive the hours it would take for specialized help to arrive. The Kit continued to move between his mother and Samantha, his behavior a heartbreaking mixture of protectiveness and pleading. He seemed torn between his natural wariness of humans and his desperate need for help that only a human could provide. "Your little one brought me here," Samantha said softly to the mother bobcat, maintaining eye contact but keeping her posture non-threatening. "He's braver than anyone gives your kind credit for." She reached for her radio, keeping her movements slow. "Base, this is Reed. I've located an adult female bobcat, severely injured in an illegal trap. Position is approximately 500 meters downstream from my last reported location, in the ravine below the burn zone. Subject is alive but critical. I'll need a wildlife rescue team with medical support immediately." The radio crackled with her supervisor's concerned response. "Copy that, Reed. Wildlife rescue has been notified. ETA approximately 90 minutes. What's your assessment? Can the animal hold on that long?" Samantha studied the mother bobcat's condition, noting how each breath seemed more labored than the last. Negative, base. Subject is critical, showing signs of severe dehydration, possible infection, and shock. Request permission to attempt emergency field intervention. There was a pause on the other end, her supervisor undoubtedly weighing the considerable risks of such an action against the likelihood that the bobcat would die without immediate help. "Reed, you know protocol on handling predator species without proper equipment." "Sir, with respect, this animal won't last 90 minutes. The trap appears to have been in place for at least 48 hours. I have basic wildlife medical training and my field kit. I believe I can stabilize her until the rescue. Team arrives." Another pause, longer this time. "Approved, Reed, but exercise extreme caution. Document everything. Wildlife Division is being updated on the situation." "Copy that. Reed out." Samantha carefully set the radio aside and turned her full attention back to the injured bobcat and her determined Kit. She needed to establish enough trust to approach without causing additional stress to the wounded animal. "I know you're afraid," she said to the mother, maintaining that same calm tone. "But your little one trusted me enough to bring me here. Just a little more trust, that's all I'm asking." She reached into her pack, movements deliberate and unhurried, and pulled out her water bottle and a collapsible bowl. She poured a small amount of water into the bowl and set it on the ground, then pushed it forward with a stick until it was within reach of the trapped bobcat. The mother eyed the water with evident longing, but made no move toward it, her distrust of humans overriding even her desperate thirst. The Kit, however, approached the bowl cautiously, sniffed it, then looked back at his mother, as if encouraging her. When she still didn't move, the Kit did something that squeezed Samantha's heart. He began to lap at the water himself, demonstrating it was safe. After a moment, the mother bobcat stretched her neck forward just enough to reach the bowl and began to drink weakly. Samantha used this moment to move slightly closer, still maintaining a respectful distance, but positioning herself where she could better assess the trap. It was a standard leg hold trap. barbaric but simple in design. Releasing it would require depressing the spring levers on either side simultaneously, a straightforward mechanism, but one that would require her to be within striking distance of a wounded predator. Even in her weakened state, the Bobcat could inflict serious injuries if she panicked. Samantha knew she needed to work quickly, but couldn't rush. She reached again into her pack and pulled out a small first aid kit, removing a pair of latex gloves and a package of beef jerky she kept for long patrols. The food might serve as both distraction and energy source for the depleted animal. Breaking off a small piece of the jerky, she tossed it gently toward the mother bobcat. The scent of meat immediately captured both animals' attention. The kit darted forward first, sniffing the offering cautiously before taking it. The mother watched her offspring eat, hunger evident in her gaze. Samantha tossed another, slightly larger piece closer to the mother. After a moment's hesitation, instinct overcame fear, and the bobcat stretched to take the food, consuming it with the desperate efficiency of an animal on the brink of starvation. "That's it," Samantha encouraged softly. "Small steps." While the bobcat was distracted with a third piece of jerky, Samantha moved to a position where she could better examine the trap. The design was cruelly effective. Metal teeth had clamped down just above the bobcat's ankle, not quite breaking the bone, but crushing soft tissue and preventing escape. The more the animal had struggled, the deeper the teeth had dug. Seeing it up close only intensified Samantha's anger. She had encountered poachers' work before, animals shot out of season, protected species killed for black market sales, habitats destroyed for quick profit. It was the darkest side of her job, the human cruelty that contrasted so sharply with the natural beauty she worked to protect. But professional anger would have to wait. Right now, this mother and her determined kit needed her complete focus. "I'm going to get that thing off you," she promised the bobcat quietly. "It's going to hurt, but then it'll be better. Just a little more trust." She laid out her tools, heavy gloves from her pack, a blanket normally used for emergency warmth that could serve as a protective barrier, antiseptic spray, bandages, and a small set of bolt cutters she carried for clearing trail obstructions. It wasn't ideal equipment for wildlife rescue, but it would have to do. The kit watched her preparations with intense focus, staying close to his mother, but not interfering. There was an almost eerie intelligence in his observation, as if he somehow understood Samantha was preparing to help rather than harm. "Your little one is something special," Samantha told the mother bobcat as she pulled on the heavy work gloves. "He did everything right. Found help, led me here. Not many humans would have done better." She positioned the blanket where she could quickly pull it over the bobcat's head and upper body if necessary, not to hurt her, but to protect both the animal and herself if panic set in during the procedure. Every movement was deliberate, telegraphed in advance to avoid startling either bobcat. The mother's golden eyes tracked her constantly, alert despite her weakened state. There was a wary understanding in that gaze that Samantha recognized from other injured predators she had encountered. A calculation of threat versus potential help, of pain versus possibility of relief. "I know you're afraid," Samantha acknowledged. "I would be too, but I promise I'm going to do this as quickly as I can." With everything prepared, Samantha took a deep breath and moved into position. The next few moments would be critical. The difference between life and death for this remarkable mother and the future of her extraordinarily brave kit. Samantha moved with the careful precision she had learned during her military field medic training. Though treating wild predators hadn't been part of those lessons, the fundamental principles remained the same. Minimize suffering, work efficiently, and above all, do no additional harm. She positioned herself at the optimal angle to access the trap while maintaining some distance from the bobcat's claws and teeth. "Easy now," she murmured, her voice a steady, calming presence. "I know this is scary, The kit had settled beside his mother's head, continuing his gentle nuzzling as if trying to reassure her. His behavior went far beyond what Samantha had ever observed or read about regarding Bobcat family dynamics. This level of problem-solving, identifying a human as a potential source of help, leading that human to his mother, and now seemingly comforting her through the rescue, displayed cognitive abilities that wildlife researchers would find remarkable. But academic observations would have to wait. The mother bobcat's breathing had become increasingly labored, her golden eyes half-lidded with exhaustion and pain. Time was running short. Samantha offered one final piece of jerky, placing it where the mother could reach it without moving her injured leg. As the bobcat weakly accepted this distraction, Samantha moved in with decisive action. With one smooth motion, she positioned the bolt cutters at the spring mechanism of the trap. "This is going to hurt for just a moment," she said, maintaining that calm, steady tone that seemed to have some soothing effect on both bobcats. "But then it will be better." In a swift, powerful squeeze, she depressed one of the spring levers. The mother bobcat flinched, but was too weak to react more strongly. Encouraged, Samantha quickly repositioned to access the second spring. Kit watched intently, his small body tense, but making no move to interfere. With the second spring depressed, the cruel metal teeth of the trap loosened their grip. Carefully, using her gloved hand, Samantha opened the jaws fully and gently pulled the device away from the bobcat's mangled leg. The mother let out a low, pitiful sound, somewhere between a growl and a whimper, as blood began to flow more freely from the wound, but she made no attempt to strike out at Samantha. That's it, Samantha encouraged, quickly setting the trap aside. Worst part's over. She reached for her first aid kit, pulling out antiseptic spray and gauze bandages. The wound was ugly, deep punctures where the metal teeth had dug into flesh, surrounded by swollen, inflamed tissue. Signs of infection were evident, but not yet to the point of systemic failure. If they could get antibiotics into her system, soon the mother bobcat had a fighting chance. Samantha worked methodically, first cleaning the wound with antiseptic-soaked gauze. The bobcat tensed at the sting but remained still, as if somehow understanding that this necessary pain was different from the ongoing agony of the trap. The kit moved closer to his mother's head, making soft, chittering sounds that seemed to comfort her. "Your little one is right here," Samantha told the mother as she continued cleaning the wound. "He's been so brave for you." After thoroughly cleaning the injury, Samantha applied antibiotic ointment from her kit. It was formulated for humans, not wildlife, but it was better than nothing until the proper veterinary supplies arrived. She then wrapped the leg loosely with gauze, providing some protection without restricting circulation to the damaged tissues. Throughout the procedure, Samantha kept up a steady stream of quiet talk, not because the bobcats understood her words, but because her calm, soothing voice seemed to help maintain the fragile trust that had formed. She explained each step before taking it, described what she was seeing, and repeatedly praised both the mother's stoicism and the kit's remarkable bravery. "You've been trapped here for days," she said softly as she secured the bandage. "Haven't eaten, haven't had proper water, and all that time your little one was trying to find help for you." The image struck Samantha with unexpected emotional force. The tiny kit, alone and frightened after his mother disappeared, somehow having the courage and intelligence to seek human assistance instead of hiding. How many times had he ventured out, searching for someone who might help? How many humans had he approached who had failed to understand what he was trying to communicate? With the immediate first aid complete, Samantha turned her attention to the bobcat's dehydration. She refilled the collapsible bowl with fresh water, and this time placed it directly beside the mother's head so she wouldn't need to strain to reach it. The bobcat drank weakly but steadily, clear evidence of her severe dehydration. Samantha checked her watch. The wildlife rescue team wouldn't arrive for at least another hour. She needed to keep the mother bobcat stable until then, which meant addressing the hypothermia that had set in during her days of immobility. Though the day wasn't particularly cold, the ravine's shadowed floor remained cool, and the injured predator had been unable to move to warmer locations or generate adequate body heat through normal movement. Removing her own insulated jacket, Samantha draped it gently over the bobcat's body, carefully avoiding the injured leg and the animal's head. The mother watched this action with cautious eyes, but made no protest. Whether from trust or simply exhaustion, she was accepting Samantha's help. The rescue team is bringing proper medical supplies, Samantha explained as she tucked the jacket around the bobcat's flanks. They'll give you fluids, antibiotics, proper pain relief. My job is just to keep you stable until they get here. She glanced at the kit, who had settled against his mother's side, his small body pressed close to hers, in a gesture of comfort and warmth. You did the impossible, little one. You found help when no one else would have even tried. The scene before her represented everything Samantha loved about her work as a ranger. Not just protecting the wilderness as an abstract concept, but protecting the individual lives that made up that complex ecosystem. Each animal played its role, each life mattered in the delicate balance. This mother bobcat was a keystone predator, controlling rodent populations and maintaining the health of the forest. Her survival mattered not just as a single life saved, but as a crucial part of the habitat's ongoing health. Yet Samantha also recognized something deeper in this particular rescue, something that transcended ecological calculations. The kit's actions had displayed intelligence, determination, and a form of loyalty that many would describe as love. It challenged the clinical, detached way humans often viewed wild animals, revealing a depth of emotion and cognition that blurred the comfortable lines between wild and sentient. Samantha reached for her radio to update the base on the situation. Base, this is Reed. I've successfully removed the trap and administered emergency first aid. Subject is stable, but will need immediate veterinary care upon rescue team arrival. The juvenile remains present and non-aggressive. Copy that, Reed, came the response. Rescue team estimates arrival in approximately 50 minutes. They're requesting ongoing status updates. We'll provide, read out. Samantha set the radio aside and settled into a comfortable position a few feet from the bobcats. Close enough to monitor and assist if needed, but far enough to give the wild animals some sense of security. The mother's eyes remained fixed on her, no longer with the initial terror, but with a wary acceptance. The kit had begun grooming his mother's face with tiny licks, an instinctive behavior that nonetheless conveyed such tenderness that Samantha felt her throat tighten with emotion. Illegal trap lay where she had tossed it, a harsh metal intrusion in the natural beauty of the ravine. Samantha would make sure it was collected as evidence. Poaching in national forests carried significant penalties, and she intended to see those responsible held accountable. But for now, her focus remained entirely on the injured mother and her remarkable kit. The worst is over, she told them softly. Help is coming. The mother bobcat's breathing had steadied somewhat since the trap's removal, though she remained dangerously weak. She accepted small sips of water whenever Samantha offered the bowl, but made no attempt to eat the remaining jerky. Her system was too compromised for solid food right now. She would need intravenous fluids and carefully monitored nutrition to recover from her ordeal. Samantha used her field notebook to document the situation, sketching the trap's position, the nature of the injuries, and making detailed notes about the kit's unprecedented behavior. These observations would be valuable not just for the immediate veterinary care, but for wildlife researchers studying bobcat cognition and social structures. What this kit had done seeking human help, leading that help to his mother, remaining present throughout the rescue, contradicted much of what was believed about Bobcat behavior. The shadows in the ravine had lengthened as afternoon gave way to early evening. Samantha switched on her headlamp, setting it to its dimmest setting to provide just enough light without disturbing the bobcats. The mother's eyes had closed, her body giving in to exhaustion now that the immediate threat of the trap had been removed. The kit remained vigilant, his attention alternating between his mother and Samantha, as if ensuring that both were still present and accounted for. "Rest if you can," Samantha encouraged the mother. "Your little one is watching over you, and so am I." In the distance, Samantha could hear the faint but growing sound of vehicles approaching on the Forest Service road that ran along the ridge. Above, the rescue team was making good time. Soon, this injured mother would receive the proper medical care she so desperately needed. The illegal trap that had nearly claimed her life would instead become evidence in the ongoing battle against poaching. And her remarkable kit, this tiny bobcat who had defied every expectation of his species, would have a chance to grow up with the mother he had fought so hard to save. As the sounds of the approaching rescue grew louder, Samantha felt an unexpected sense of pride, not in her own actions, but in having witnessed something so extraordinary. In her years as a ranger, she had seen countless examples of nature's resilience and adaptability. But this, a kit's determination to save his mother, his trust in a human when trust made no logical sense, this was something beyond resilience. It was a reminder that the natural world still held mysteries that couldn't be fully explained by scientific observation alone. "They're almost here," she told the bobcats quietly, "just a little longer." The distinctive rumble of the wildlife rescue vehicle reverberated through the ravine as it navigated the rough Forest Service road above. Samantha rose to her feet, careful to move slowly so as not to startle the bobcats, and retrieved her emergency signal flare from her pack. She stepped a short distance away, pointed it skyward, and fired. The bright red flare burst overhead, temporarily illuminating the darkening forest with an eerie crimson glow. "They'll find us now," she assured the bobcats, returning to her position near them. The mother bobcat's eyes had opened at the sound of the flare, her body tensing slightly before relaxing again. The kit pressed closer to her side, his small form providing what little warmth and comfort he could. Despite his youth and size, he maintained a protective posture, his attention shifting between his mother and the new sounds approaching from above. Minutes later, voices called down from the ridge. "Ranger Reed, Wildlife Rescue." "Down here," Samantha called back, switching her headlamp to its brightest setting and waving it to signal their location. In the ravine, about 30 feet down, two figures appeared at the edge of the ridge, illuminated by their powerful flashlights. One was Dr. Eliza Chen, the regional wildlife veterinarian whom Samantha had worked with on several previous rescue operations. The other was Miguel Vasquez, one of the most experienced wildlife technicians in the district. They were the best possible team for this particular emergency. "We're coming down," Dr. Chen called, her voice calm but carrying clearly. "Through the forest. What's the situation?" "Adult female bobcat. Severe leg injury from an illegal trap, approximately 3 to 4 days of immobility, signs of dehydration and early infection," Samantha reported professionally. Her kit is present and has been non-aggressive throughout. The intervention. As the rescue team carefully descended the steep ravine wall, Samantha continued her gentle reassurance to the bobcats. "These are friends," she explained softly. "They're going to help you even more than I could." The kit's ears flattened as the newcomers approached, his body language shifting from protective to fearful. Samantha understood his anxiety. One human might have gained his desperate trust, but 3 represented a potential threat. She remained where she was, a familiar presence to bridge the gap between the frightened wild animals and the help they needed. Dr. Chen approached slowly, her experienced eye already assessing the situation from several feet away. "Remarkable that you managed to remove the trap without sedation," she commented quietly to Samantha, careful to keep her voice low and non-threatening. "I had an unusual ally," Samantha replied, nodding toward the kit. "He's the one who found me on patrol and led me here. I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Chen's eyebrows rose in surprise, but professional focus quickly returned. She knelt at a respectful distance, setting down her medical kit. "How long has she been free of the trap?" "About 45 minutes. I cleaned the wound as best I could with my field kit, gave her water, and tried to keep her warm." Miguel had begun setting up portable battery-powered lights, creating a gentle illumination around the rescue site. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had participated in dozens of wildlife emergencies, carefully balancing the need for visibility with minimal disturbance to the animals. "The kit hasn't left her side?" Dr. Chen asked, preparing a sedative injection while keeping a cautious eye on both bobcats. "Not once," Samantha confirmed. "He's shown remarkable awareness throughout, almost as if he understands what's happening." Dr. Chen nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Bobcats are intelligent predators, but this level of behavior is certainly unusual. Makes our job both easier and more complicated. We need to consider both animals' welfare now." She prepared a blowpipe with the sedative dart, a method that would allow her to administer the necessary medication without approaching close enough to trigger the mother bobcat's defensive instincts. "I'm going to sedate her now. The kit may become distressed when his mother loses consciousness. Be ready." Samantha positioned herself where she could quickly intercept the kit if necessary, though she hoped force wouldn't be needed. The trust they had established was fragile, and physical restraint might shatter it completely. With practiced precision, Dr. Chen raised the blowpipe to her lips and sent the dart into the muscle of the mother bobcat's shoulder. The bobcat flinched at the impact, but was too weak to do more. The kit immediately sensed something was wrong, rising to his feet with an alarmed chirp. "It's okay," Samantha soothed, keeping her voice steady. "It's medicine to help her. She's going to sleep for a little while so they can fix her leg." Whether the kit understood the words or merely the tone, he remained beside his mother, though his body vibrated with tension as he watched the sedative take effect. The mother's eyes grew heavy, her head slowly lowering to rest on the forest floor. Within minutes, she was fully unconscious, her breathing deep and regular under the influence of the medication. The kit nudged her face urgently, making small, distressed sounds when she didn't respond. He looked up at Samantha with those intense eyes, and in them she saw something that squeezed her heart. Confusion, fear, a question she couldn't answer in terms he would understand. "She's just sleeping," Samantha assured him, extending her hand slowly. "She's going to be okay." To everyone's surprise, the kit approached Samantha's outstretched fingers, sniffing them cautiously before pressing his small head against her palm. The gesture seemed to seek reassurance, a moment of trust so profound that both Dr. Chen and Miguel stared in amazement. "I've never seen anything like that," Miguel whispered, carefully setting up the portable examination table nearby. "Wild. Bobcat kits are usually impossible to approach, even when their mother is sedated. This little one is special," Samantha replied simply, gently stroking the kit's head. "He's been through an extraordinary ordeal." With the mother safely sedated, Dr. Chen moved in to begin her examination. She checked vital signs first: temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, then moved on to a careful assessment of the leg. Injury? Miguel assisted, handing her instruments and supplies while maintaining a professional silence that kept the environment as calm as possible. Temperatures low, heart rate elevated, Dr. Chen reported quietly. Severe dehydration as expected. The leg injury is significant. Tissue damage, possible tendon involvement. She'll need surgery and intensive care. Samantha continued to provide a steady presence for the kit, who watched the proceedings with intense focus. Rather than fleeing as most wild animals would, he seemed determined to understand what was happening to his mother. His behavior continued to defy everything Samantha had learned about wild bobcat behavior. I'll start IV fluids and antibiotics. Dr. Chen continued, efficiently inserting a catheter into the unconscious bobcat's foreleg. Then, we'll stabilize the leg for transport. The surgical team is already prepped and waiting at the wildlife center. As Dr. Chen administered the medications, Miguel prepared the specialized transport carrier. Unlike standard animal cages, this one was designed specifically for injured wildlife, padded, secure, and configured to minimize stress during movement. He laid out warming packs to preheat the interior, ensuring the bobcat's body temperature would remain stable during transport. "What about the kit?" Samantha asked, watching as Dr. Chen wrapped the injured leg in a temporary splint. "He won't leave her willingly." Dr. Chen considered the question while continuing her work. "Ideally, we'd keep them together. Maternal bond is important for development, and this kit has already shown extraordinary attachment. But medical protocol usually requires separating them during treatment. He found me in the middle of the forest and led me miles to his mother," Samantha pointed out quietly. "If we separate them, he might try to follow and put himself at risk." The veterinarian nodded thoughtfully, her hands never pausing in their careful work. "You're right. We'll need to modify our approach. We can prepare a separate compartment in the carrier, divided by mesh so they can see and smell each other, but he can't interfere with her medical care." Miguel immediately began adjusting the transport carrier, adding a mesh divider as Dr. Chen had suggested. It was an improvised solution, but potentially the best compromise between proper medical care and the psychological needs of these remarkable animals. Dr. Chen administered a final injection, pain medication that would keep the mother comfortable. During transport, then carefully inserted the IV line into a secure port on her leg. "Ready to move her," she announced. "Let's do this as smoothly as possible." With practiced coordination, the three humans gently lifted the unconscious bobcat onto a stretcher, maintaining proper alignment of her injured leg. The kit watched this process with evident anxiety, making small, distressed sounds, but never fleeing or becoming aggressive. His trust in Samantha seemed to extend, at least partially, to her human companions. "Come on, little guy," Samantha encouraged as they carefully carried the mother toward the waiting transport carrier. "You're going with her." The kit followed the procession, staying close to Samantha's heels as they navigated the uneven ground of the ravine floor. When they reached the carrier, Dr. Chen and Miguel carefully settled the mother into the main compartment, securing her position to prevent any shifting during transport that might aggravate her injuries. Then came the challenging part, getting the kit into the adjoining compartment. Samantha knelt beside the carrier, gesturing toward the open door. "Your mum's in there," she said softly. "You can go with her." For a moment, the kit hesitated, his wild instincts finally asserting themselves at the sight of the enclosed space. He backed away slightly, ears flattening with uncertainty. Samantha didn't move, didn't try to force him. Instead, she simply opened the mesh divider enough for him to see his mother inside. The effect was immediate. With a soft chirp, the kit darted forward, squeezing through the opening and pressing himself against the mesh divider as close as possible to his sedated mother. Samantha quickly secured the door, exchanging an amazed glance with Dr. Chen. "That bond is incredible," the veterinarian said quietly. "I've been working with wildlife for 15 years, and I've never seen anything quite like it." "Will they be okay?" Samantha asked. unable to keep a note of personal concern from her voice. This had gone beyond a professional rescue for her. Something about this determined Kit and his injured mother had touched her deeply. Dr. Chen nodded, her expression serious but hopeful. The mother's injuries are severe but treatable. With surgery, antibiotics, and proper care, she has a good chance of recovery. The Kit appears healthy despite the stress. He's been managing to feed himself while trying to help his mother. And afterward, Samantha pressed, will they be releasable? It was the critical question for any wildlife rescue. The ultimate goal was always to return animals to their natural habitat whenever possible. But injuries like those the mother had sustained could sometimes result in permanent disability, making release impossible. Too early to tell, Dr. Chen admitted. We'll need to assess her mobility after surgery and rehabilitation, but bobcats are remarkably adaptable. If she regains enough function to hunt effectively, release would be the plan. Miguel had finished securing the transport carrier and was preparing the climbing equipment that would allow them to hoist it safely up the ravine wall to the waiting vehicle. We're ready when you are, Doc, he called softly. Dr. Chen nodded, then turned back to Samantha. You made this rescue possible. Not many rangers would have understood what the Kit was trying to communicate. Samantha shook her head slightly. I just listened. He did the impossible part. With the transport preparations complete, Samantha took a final moment to peer through the carrier's window. The mother lay peacefully under sedation, her breathing steady and strong now that fluids and medications were entering her system. The Kit had curled up against the mesh divider, his small body pressed as close as possible to his mother, his extraordinary eyes watching Samantha with what seemed like understanding. You did it, little one, she whispered. You saved her. The climb back up the ravine wall was a carefully orchestrated process that took nearly 40 minutes. Miguel led the way, securing ropes and creating a safe path for the precious cargo they carried. Dr. Chen followed, monitoring the transport carrier as it was steadily hoisted upward, constantly checking on her patients through the viewing window. Samantha brought up the rear, providing additional security and support whenever needed. Throughout the ascent, she maintained a gentle stream of reassuring words, not for her human companions, but for the Kit who remained alert and watchful inside the carrier. We're almost there, little one, she would say whenever they paused to readjust their grip or secure a new anchor point. Just a bit further, by the time they reached the ridgetop, night had fully settled over the forest. The wildlife rescue vehicle stood waiting, its specialized medical compartment already prepared with warming equipment and monitoring devices. 2 additional wildlife technicians had arrived to assist with the transport, bringing the total team to 5 people, a significant response that reflected the urgency of the situation. Let's get her loaded and on the road, Dr. Chen directed, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to managing emergency situations. I want to be at the surgical center within 40 minutes. The team worked with practiced efficiency, securing the transport carrier inside the vehicle and connecting the IV line to a hanging fluid bag. One of the technicians, a young woman named Jessie, whom Samantha recognized from previous wildlife operations, settled into the monitoring position beside the carrier. I'll keep a constant eye on them during transport, she assured Samantha, noting her obvious concern for the bobcats. We've got everything we need to handle any complications that might arise. Samantha nodded, feeling a curious reluctance to step away from the vehicle. Her professional duties were technically complete. She had located the injured animal, provided emergency first aid, and assisted with the transfer to qualified medical personnel. Protocol dictated that she should now resume her ranger duties, complete her incident report, and continue her patrol of the forest area. Yet something kept her rooted to the spot, watching through the vehicle's open door as the team made final preparations for departure. The Kit had positioned himself so that he could maintain visual contact with both his mother and the world outside the carrier. As Samantha stood there, those remarkable eyes found hers, holding her gaze with an intensity that seemed to transcend the natural boundaries between human and wildlife. Dr. Chen noticed Samantha's hesitation and stepped closer, speaking quietly so only she could hear. "You've formed a connection with them, especially the kit. It's not surprising after what you've been through together." Samantha nodded, slightly, embarrassed by her unprofessional attachment. "I know it's anthropomorphizing, but it feels like he's asking me to stay with them." Rather than dismissing this observation, Dr. Chen considered it seriously. In wildlife medicine, we're trained to maintain scientific objectivity. But after 20 years in this field, I've learned that sometimes animal behavior defies our neat categories. She glanced at the kit, who remained focused on Samantha. "This little one has already demonstrated extraordinary behavior in seeking human help. His attachment to you might actually serve a calming function during a stressful transport." She made a quick decision. "Would you be willing to ride with us to the wildlife center? Having a familiar presence might help keep the kit calm, which, in turn, could reduce stress for the mother when she begins to regain consciousness." Relief washed over Samantha. "Absolutely. I just need to notify base about the change in my patrol schedule." While Samantha radioed in her status update, the rest of the team completed the transport preparations. Miguel would follow behind in Samantha's Forest Service vehicle, ensuring everyone would have transportation back from the wildlife center. When Samantha rejoined the group, Dr. Chen was already in the driver's seat, ready to depart. "You'll ride in the back with Jesse," she instructed. "Keep talking to them if you think it helps. The kit seems responsive to your voice." Samantha climbed into the specialized transport compartment, settling on the bench opposite Jesse. Between them sat the carrier containing the two Bobcats, the mother still peacefully sedated, the kit alert and watchful. As the vehicle began to move, navigating the rough Forest Service road with careful speed, Samantha noticed the kit's anxiety increasing. His small body tensed at each bump and sway, his eyes darting nervously around the unfamiliar environment. "It's okay," she said softly, keeping her voice calm and even. "This is just a ride. We're taking your mom somewhere safe, somewhere they can help her." To both her and Jesse's surprise, the kit responded immediately to Samantha's voice, his tense posture relaxing slightly as he shifted his attention to her face. Jessie raised her eyebrows, impressed. "He really does respond to you," she whispered. "That's incredibly unusual for a wild bobcat, especially one so young." Samantha nodded, continuing her gentle monologue to the kit. She told him about the wildlife center they were heading to, describing the expert care his mother would receive there. She explained about veterinarians and surgery and healing, using the same calm, matter-of-fact tone she would use with any frightened young creature. It didn't matter that he couldn't understand her words. Her voice itself seemed to provide comfort, a thread of familiarity in an overwhelming situation. As they left the rough forest roads behind and merged onto the smoother county highway, Dr. Chen increased their speed. Through the small window separating the driver's compartment from the medical transport area, Samantha could see her checking the time repeatedly. Every minute mattered in wildlife emergency medicine, just as it did with humans. "How long has she been sedated?" Samantha asked Jesse, who was monitoring the mother bobcat's vital signs. "About 40 minutes. The dose Dr. Chen administered should keep her under for approximately 2 hours, which gives us plenty of time to reach the center and prepare for surgery." Jesse checked the IV fluid level. "She's responding well to the fluids. Her skin elasticity is already improving, which indicates the dehydration is being addressed." The kit had curled into a tight ball against the mesh divider, his small body pressed as close as possible to his mother, though his eyes remained fixed on Samantha. The trust he displayed continued to amaze her, Wild bobcats were typically among the most elusive and human-averse of North American predators. Even those habituated to human presence in national parks rarely allowed close approach. For this kit to not only seek human help, but to maintain such focus on a specific human represented behavior far outside the norm. "He's imprinted on you," Jessie observed quietly. "Not in the traditional sense of mistaking you for his species, but he's formed a trust bond. It's extraordinary." Samantha considered this assessment. What happens when his mother recovers? Will that bond complicate their rehabilitation and release? It was the question that had been nagging at the back of her mind since she first realized the depth of the kit's unusual behavior. Wildlife rehabilitation had one primary goal: to return animals to their natural habitat capable of surviving independently. Human attachment, even well-intentioned, could sometimes interfere with that goal. Jessie's expression grew thoughtful. "It's hard to say. In most cases, we'd be concerned about a young predator developing positive associations with humans. But this is different. He sought you out specifically for help, which shows a level of problem-solving and discrimination that's quite sophisticated." She watched the kit for a moment. "My guess is that he understands the difference between you as an individual and humans generally. Once his mother recovers and they're together in a more natural setting, his wild instincts should reassert themselves." The conversation paused as Dr. Chen navigated a particularly sharp curve, causing the vehicle to sway slightly. The kit tensed again, his small claws extending instinctively to grip the carrier floor. Samantha resumed her quiet narrative, describing the forest they were passing through and promising that this journey would lead to help. "The Wildlife Center is just outside Pinecrest," she explained. "They have special veterinarians who know exactly how to help your mother, and they have a quiet recovery area where you can stay with her while she heals." The kit's ears swiveled toward her voice, his posture relaxing once more. Jessie shook her head in amazement. "I've been working in wildlife rescue for 7 years," she said, "and I've never seen anything quite like this. We should document this case for the research team. It challenges some of our assumptions about bobcat cognition and social behavior." Samantha nodded, though her focus remained primarily on the kit. Scientific implications aside, she felt a personal responsibility toward these two animals. The kit had placed his trust in her when seeking help for his mother. That trust created a bond that transcended professional detachment. As they approached the outskirts of Pinecrest, the lights of human habitation began to appear through the vehicle windows. The kit noticed this change immediately, his body tensing again at these unfamiliar sights. Samantha shifted her position to partially block his view of the window, redirecting his attention to her face instead. "Almost there," she assured him. "Just a little longer." The Wildlife Center came into view, a modern single-story building set back from the main road and surrounded by several acres of forested land. Purpose-built for the rehabilitation of injured wild animals, the facility represented the perfect balance between necessary medical technology and the natural environment essential for successful recovery and release. Dr. Chen pulled the vehicle directly to the emergency entrance, where a team was already waiting. The efficiency of their movements spoke to extensive preparation and experience. Within moments of the vehicle stopping, the doors were open and the transport carrier was being carefully unloaded. "Prep or two," Dr. Chen instructed as she emerged from the driver's seat. "Full surgical team, blood work and fluid stat, radiographs of the affected limb before we begin." Samantha followed as the carrier was quickly but gently moved into the building and through a series of corridors. The interior of the Wildlife Center was nothing like a typical veterinary clinic. The lighting was subdued, the colors neutral, and sound-dampening materials covered the walls, all designed to minimize stress for wild animal patients. The Kit pressed himself against the back of his compartment as they entered this new environment, his eyes wide with anxiety despite Samantha's continued reassurances. They passed through double doors marked Surgical Suite, entering a large room that more closely resembled a hospital operating room than a veterinary clinic. A team of 3 people in surgical scrubs waited beside a prepared table, equipment already arranged for the procedure. With practiced coordination, the team transferred the sedated mother bobcat from the carrier to the table, immediately connecting her to monitoring equipment and adjusting the bright surgical lights. The Kit suddenly separated from direct contact. With his mother, let out a distressed sound that pierced Samantha's heart. One of the surgical technicians glanced at the carrier with concern. "We need to move the Kit to the recovery area," she said. "Having him here during surgery isn't protocol." Before Samantha could object, Dr. Chen intervened. "This is a special case, Teresa. The Kit has formed an unusual bond with Ranger Reed here, and he's shown remarkable behavior throughout the rescue. I'd like to keep him within visual range of his mother if possible, with Ranger Reed staying with him." The technician looked skeptical, but deferred to the veterinarian's judgment. "We can set up in the observation alcove," she suggested, pointing to a small adjoining space separated from the main surgical area by a glass partition. That way, they can see what's happening without compromising the sterile field. Samantha carried the Kit's compartment of the carrier into the alcove, positioning it so he could see his mother through both the mesh of his enclosure and the glass partition. She settled onto a stool beside him, maintaining a reassuring presence. As the surgical team began their preparations, "See, they're helping her," she told the Kit softly. "These people know exactly what to do to fix her leg." Through the glass, she watched as Dr. Chen performed a thorough examination of the injured leg, now clearly visible under the bright surgical lights. The damage was significant. Deep puncture wounds, where the trap's metal teeth had clamped down, surrounded by swollen and discolored tissue. A technician carefully shaved the fur around the wound site, while another prepared medications and surgical instruments. The Kit's attention remained fixed on his mother, his small body pressed against the carrier wall closest to the surgical. His extraordinary focus and concern continued to challenge everything Samantha had been taught about wild animal behavior. This wasn't just instinctive parent-offspring bonding. The Kit showed awareness, problem-solving, and emotional attachment that went far beyond typical wildlife behavior patterns. As the surgical team began their work in earnest, Samantha maintained her quiet narrative for the Kit, explaining each step of the procedure in simple terms. Whether he understood her words didn't matter. Her calm, steady voice provided a counterpoint to the unfamiliar sounds and sights surrounding them. Through it all, the Kit remained alert but calm, his trust in Samantha apparently extending to this strange new environment. Outside the window of the observation alcove, Samantha could see darkness had fully enveloped the wildlife center grounds. The day's patrol had transformed into something she never could have anticipated when she set out that morning. A rescue unlike any she had participated in before, guided by a tiny wild animal who had defied every expectation of his species. As the surgical team worked to save his mother, Samantha silently promised the Kit that his extraordinary courage would not be in vain. Whatever happened next, she would ensure that his remarkable journey had the best possible ending. The surgery lasted nearly 3 hours, a testament to the severity of the mother bobcat's injuries and Dr. Chen's determination to give her the best possible chance at a full recovery. Throughout the procedure, Samantha remained in the observation alcove with the Kit, watching through the glass as the skilled veterinary team worked methodically to repair the damage caused by the illegal trap. Dr. Chen first cleaned and debrided the wounded tissue, removing dead and infected areas while preserving as much healthy tissue as possible. Next came the delicate work of repairing damaged tendons and ligaments, requiring microsurgery techniques and specialized instruments. The surgical team moved with practiced precision, their focus absolute as they pieced together structures smaller than a pencil lead. From her position in the alcove, Samantha could see both the intense concentration on the surgical team's faces and the remarkable equipment they employed. The Wildlife Center was surprisingly well equipped, with technology that rivaled many human hospitals. This level of care reflected a fundamental shift in how wildlife medicine was approached, no longer just a matter of basic triage, but sophisticated treatment designed to give injured animals a genuine second chance at wild existence. The kit watched the proceedings with an intensity that continued to amaze Samantha. While he couldn't possibly understand the technical aspects of what was happening, he seemed to grasp that his mother was receiving help. His initial distress had given way to a quiet vigilance, his small body remaining pressed against the carrier wall closest to the surgical suite. "They're fixing her leg," Samantha explained softly, continuing the running commentary she had maintained throughout the operation. "See how carefully they're working. Each of those tiny stitches helps her heal." A gentle knock at the alcove door preceded the entrance of Jessie, the wildlife technician who had accompanied them in the transport vehicle. She carried a small container of what appeared to be finely chopped meat, thought our little patient. "Might be hungry?" she said quietly, handing the container to Samantha. "It's ground quail with vitamins mixed in, appropriate for a Bobcat kit his age." Samantha accepted the container with thanks. "Has he eaten anything since arriving?" Jessie shook her head. "We haven't tried to offer food until now. We wanted to minimize stress and additional stimuli, but it's been several hours, and he must be hungry after everything he's been through." Samantha carefully opened the small feeding door on the carrier and placed a small amount of the mixture inside, then closed it and moved back to give the kit space. For a long moment, he ignored the food entirely, his attention remaining fixed on the surgical proceedings. Then, perhaps registering the scent, he glanced briefly at the offering before returning his gaze to his mother. "He won't eat while she's in danger," Samantha observed, a note of wonder in her voice. "He's putting her needs before his own." Jessie watched the kit with professional interest. This level of altruistic behavior is remarkable in a wild predator so young. Most kits his age would be focused primarily on their own survival needs. She made a note on the tablet she carried. "We're documenting everything for our research division. This case challenges several established theories about Bobcat cognitive development." Samantha nodded, though her interest remained more personal than scientific. "How much longer do you think the surgery will take?" "Dr. Chen is nearly finished with the tendon repair," Jessie replied, glancing through the glass at the surgical team. "After that, it's closing the deeper tissue layers and skin. Maybe another 45 minutes. She checked her watch. "It's nearly midnight. You've been here for hours. Do you need to head back to the ranger station?" The question gave Samantha pause. Her shift had technically ended hours ago, and protocol dictated that she should have returned to file her incident report and prepare for the next day's duties. But leaving now, in the middle of this extraordinary situation, felt impossible. "I'd like to stay until they move her to recovery," she said finally. "The kit seems calmer with me here, and I'd feel better seeing this through to that point." Jessie smiled with understanding. "I'll let your station know you're still assisting us. Wildlife emergencies sometimes require flexibility from all departments." She turned to leave, then added, "I'll be back when they're ready to move her to the recovery habitat." Alone again with the kit, Samantha settled more comfortably on her stool. The events of the day, from the unusual encounter in the forest to this midnight vigil in a wildlife surgical suite, had created an experience unlike any in her years as a ranger. She had always valued her role in protecting the forest and its inhabitants, but this direct involvement in saving specific lives brought a different, more immediate satisfaction. Through the glass, she could see Dr. Chen beginning the process of closing the surgical site. The veterinarian's movements remained precise despite the hours of intense concentration, each suture placed with careful attention to both function and healing. One of the technicians was preparing a lightweight cast that would protect the leg while still allowing some natural movement during recovery. "Almost done," Samantha told the kit. "Your mum is going to have a special bandage on her leg for a while, but it will help her get better." The kit's ears swiveled toward her voice, though his eyes remained fixed on his mother. He had still not touched the food Jessie had brought, his attention solely focused on the activity in the surgical suite. Samantha marveled again at his dedication. This tiny predator's devotion to his mother transcended basic instinct in ways that science struggled to categorize. The door to the alcove opened again, and this time Miguel entered, carrying a steaming cup of coffee, which he offered to Samantha. "Thought you could use this," he said. "It's been a long night." Samantha accepted the cup gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma before taking a careful sip. "How's everything outside?" "I secured your vehicle at the ranger station and got a ride back here," Miguel reported. "Also spoke with your supervisor. He's been updated on the situation, said to tell you good work." He nodded toward the kit. "Our little hero holding up okay?" "He hasn't left that spot since we arrived," Samantha replied. "Won't eat, barely moves, just watches everything they're doing to help his mother." Miguel shook his head, clearly impressed. "In 15 years of wildlife work, I've seen some remarkable things, but nothing quite like this little guy. Makes you wonder how much we still don't understand about these animals." Through the glass, they could see the surgical team applying the final dressings to the mother bobcat's leg. Dr. Chen stepped back, stretching her shoulders after the hours of sustained focus. She spoke briefly with her team, then turned toward the observation alcove and gave a thumbs-up signal. Surgery complete and apparently successful. Relief washed over Samantha. She hadn't realized how tense she had been until that moment, when the weight of uncertainty lifted. "See that?" she said to the kit. "Your mom made it through surgery. She's going to be okay." As if understanding her words, the kit's posture changed slightly. Still alert, still watchful, but with a subtle relaxation that hadn't been present before. He finally turned his attention to the food container, sniffing it cautiously before taking a small bite. Samantha and Miguel exchanged smiles as the kit began to eat, his tiny body still positioned to maintain visual contact with his mother. "He was waiting until he knew she was safe," Miguel observed quietly. "That's not just instinct, that's awareness." The door opened once more as Jessie returned, accompanied by another wildlife technician, pushing a specialized transport gurney. "They're ready to move her to the recovery habitat," she announced. "You can bring the kit and follow us." Samantha carefully lifted the carrier, ensuring smooth movements to avoid startling the kit, and followed the team as they wheeled the still sedated mother bobcat through a series of corridors. They entered a section of the facility labeled Predator Recovery, passing through another set of secure doors into a remarkable space unlike anything Samantha had expected. The recovery habitat was essentially an indoor-outdoor enclosure designed to mimic a natural forest environment while allowing for careful monitoring and medical intervention. The indoor portion featured a heated floor with natural substrate, rock formations, and several elevated resting platforms. Large one-way glass panels allowed staff to observe the animals without being seen. The outdoor section, visible through a mesh tunnel that could be closed off if necessary, contained native vegetation, logs, and natural hiding spots. "We'll settle her in the indoor area until she fully recovers from anesthesia," Jessie explained. as the team carefully transferred the mother bobcat from the gurney to a soft bed of natural materials. The heating elements in the floor will help maintain her body temperature, and we can observe her vital signs through our monitoring system without disturbing her. Samantha watched as they positioned the mother carefully, ensuring her injured leg was properly supported. An IV line remained in place, secured to allow continued administration of fluids and medications. Small, discreet cameras were positioned throughout the enclosure, providing multiple viewing angles for the medical team. "When can the kit join her?" Samantha asked, noting how intently he was watching the proceedings from his carrier. Dr. Chen, who had joined them in the recovery habitat, considered the question. "Normally, we'd keep them separated until the mother is fully awake and stable. But given the exceptional circumstances and the kit's obvious attachment, I think we can allow supervised reintroduction once we've completed the initial recovery monitoring." She approached Samantha and the carrier, studying the kit with professional interest. His behavior throughout this entire situation has been remarkable. The research team is very interested in documenting this case. It challenges some of our fundamental assumptions about bobcat cognition and social bonds. "Will they be releasable?" Samantha asked, voicing the question that had been foremost in her mind throughout the ordeal. "After all this, will they be able to return to the wild?" Dr. Chen's expression turned thoughtful. "It's too early to give a definitive answer. The mother's injuries were severe, and we won't know the extent of functional recovery until she begins rehabilitation. Best case scenario, she regains full use of the leg and can be released with her kit once fully healed." She hesitated slightly. "Worst case, if she can't regain sufficient function to hunt effectively, we'd need to consider other options." Samantha understood the unspoken implications. A predator that couldn't hunt couldn't survive in the wild. In such cases, animals sometimes became permanent residents of wildlife education centers or sanctuaries, alive but never again truly wild. "And the kit's unusual behavior toward humans?" she pressed. "Will that affect his ability to be released?" "That's another unknown," Dr. Chen admitted. "His behavior toward you specifically has been extraordinary, but we don't yet know if that represents a general comfort with humans or a unique connection he formed in a crisis situation." She glanced at the kit, who remained focused on his. "Mother, during rehabilitation, we'll assess whether he maintains appropriate wariness of humans generally. If he does, release remains the goal." As they spoke, the mother bobcat showed the first signs of emerging from anesthesia, a slight twitching of her ears, a subtle change in breathing pattern. Dr. Chen moved immediately to the monitoring station, checking vital signs and medication. "Levels, she's coming around well," she reported after a moment. "Strong cardiac function, good oxygen saturation. The transition from surgical anesthesia is often the most delicate period, but she's navigating it beautifully." Samantha felt a profound sense of relief. Each positive report increased the chances that this remarkable story would have the ending the kit had fought so hard to achieve. His mother, healthy and free, returning with him to the wilderness that was their true home. "I think we can try introducing the kit now," Dr. Chen decided, observing the mother's steadily improving vital signs. Her consciousness level is still reduced enough that she won't be startled or defensive, but she's stable enough for the interaction. She turned to Samantha. "Would you like to handle the introduction? He seems most comfortable with you." Samantha nodded, carefully lifting the carrier and bringing it near the soft nest where the mother lay. Following Dr. Chen's instructions, she positioned the carrier door facing the mother bobcat, then slowly opened it. Rather than reaching in to remove the kit, she simply created the opening and stepped back, allowing him to emerge at his own pace. The kit hesitated for only a moment, before darting out of the carrier and immediately to his mother's side. With exquisite gentleness, he approached her face, making soft, chirping sounds that seemed to express both concern and recognition. He carefully avoided her injured leg and the medical equipment, somehow understanding which areas to avoid. The mother's eyes opened slowly, clouded with medication, but focusing gradually on her kit. A soft rumble emanated from her throat, not a growl of warning, but a deeper, gentler sound of recognition. The kit responded with more urgent chirps, pressing his small body against her head in what could only be described as an embrace. Samantha felt tears welling in her eyes at the reunion. After days of separation, after the kit's extraordinary journey to find help, after surgery and uncertainty, mother and child were together again. It was a moment of pure connection that transcended species boundaries, a universal expression of the bond between parent and offspring. Remarkable, Dr. Chen whispered, watching the interaction with professional wonder. He's carefully avoiding all the medical equipment while still maintaining physical contact. The level of awareness and adaptation is extraordinary. The mother bobcat's eyes had closed again, the effort of briefly awakening exhausting her depleted resources. But her breathing remained steady, her body relaxed now that her kit was by her side. For his part, the kit had settled into a protective position beside her head, his small body pressed against hers in a gesture of comfort and connection. "I think they're going to be okay now," Jessie said quietly. "We'll maintain round-the-clock monitoring, but having them together will reduce stress for both of them." Samantha nodded, knowing it was finally time for her to leave. Her role in this remarkable rescue had come to its natural conclusion. The bobcats were now in the most capable hands possible, receiving care that represented the best of human compassion and scientific knowledge. "When will you know more about their prognosis?" she asked Dr. Chen as they stepped away from the recovery habitat, leaving the reunited bobcats to rest under the watchful eye of the monitoring system. "I'd expect to have a preliminary assessment of her recovery potential within a week," the veterinarian replied. "The first 48 hours will tell us a lot about how well the surgical repairs are holding and whether infection has been successfully addressed. After that, it's a matter of healing and rehabilitation." She placed a hand briefly on Samantha's shoulder. "We'll keep you updated on their progress. Your role in this rescue was crucial. Without your willingness to follow that kit and understand what he was trying to communicate, we would never have found the mother in time." Samantha shook her head slightly. "He's the remarkable one. I just listened." As she prepared to leave the wildlife center, stepping out into the cool night air, Samantha found herself reflecting on the extraordinary events of the day. In her years as a ranger, she had participated in many wildlife encounters, but none had challenged her understanding of animal cognition and emotion like this one. The kit's determination to save his mother, his trust in a human stranger, his unwavering focus throughout the rescue and treatment, all spoke to capabilities far beyond what science typically attributed to wild animals. Miguel was waiting with a vehicle to drive her back to the ranger station. As they pulled away from the wildlife center, Samantha cast one last glance at the building where mother and kit now rested, beginning their long journey toward recovery and, hopefully, eventual return to the wilderness. "Quite a day," Miguel remarked as they drove through the quiet streets of Pinecrest. "Something you'll remember for a long time." Samantha nodded, watching the forest silhouettes against the night sky. "It makes you wonder how much we still don't understand about the animals we share this planet with. Their awareness, their emotions, their capabilities." The experience had shifted something fundamental in her perception, not just of bobcats, but of the countless other creatures that inhabited the wilderness she patrolled each day. Behind their wild eyes might exist depths of awareness and feeling that humans had barely begun to comprehend. The kit had crossed the boundaries between species to seek help, demonstrating a level of problem-solving and trust that defied conventional understanding of wildlife behavior. As the ranger station came into view, Samantha felt both physical exhaustion and profound gratitude wash over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead for the injured mother and her remarkable kit, their story had already changed at least one human's understanding of the wild world. And in that change lay the seed of something powerful, a deeper respect for the complex inner lives of the creatures with whom humans shared the earth. Dawn was breaking over the mountains as Samantha finally completed her incident report. The ranger station was quiet at this early hour, with only the overnight staff preparing to hand over duties to the morning shift. After returning from the wildlife center, she had chosen to stay and document the extraordinary events while they remained fresh in her mind, knowing that both scientific and legal aspects of the case required thorough recording. The report encompassed not only the rescue details, but also the evidence of illegal trapping. The trap itself had been collected and logged as evidence, its location precisely documented. Poaching in national forests carried serious penalties, and Samantha was determined to see justice served for the suffering inflicted on the mother bobcat and the orphaning of her kit. District Ranger Marshal Kent appeared in the doorway of the small office where Samantha was working, two steaming mugs of coffee in hand. He was an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with the weathered features of someone who had spent decades in the backcountry. At 58, he had been managing this district for nearly 20 years and had seen almost everything the wilderness could offer. Almost. "Heard you had quite a night," he said, placing one of the mugs on Samantha's desk. "Miguel filled me in on the basics, but I'd like to hear the full story from you." Samantha accepted the coffee gratefully, taking a long sip before launching into a detailed account of her encounter with the kit and the subsequent rescue. Kent listened without interruption, his expression shifting from skepticism to amazement as the narrative unfolded. "In all my years, I've never heard anything like it," he admitted when she finished. "A bobcat kit seeking human help deliberately and then staying with you through transport and treatment." He shook his head. "If I didn't know you to be the most level-headed ranger on my team, I might question the details." "I know how it sounds," Samantha acknowledged. "But Dr. Chen and the wildlife team witnessed it too. They're documenting everything for research purposes." Kent nodded thoughtfully. "And the prognosis?" "Uncertain. The mother's injuries were severe, but the surgery went well. They'll know more in the coming days." She hesitated, then added, "I'd like to follow up on their progress, if that's acceptable." Kent studied her for a moment, noting the unusual personal investment. In wildlife management, maintaining professional distance was generally emphasized. Individual animals were viewed as components of populations rather than as specific cases for ongoing concern. But he had known Samantha long enough to recognize when something had genuinely affected her. "Of course," he said finally, "consider it part of your follow-up on the poaching investigation." Speaking of which, he picked up her report, scanning the final pages. This trap was definitely illegal. Wrong type, wrong location, no identification tags. "Have you checked with local law enforcement about recent poaching activity in the area?" "Not yet. I was planning to contact Sheriff Reyes this morning." Kent nodded approvingly. "Good. I want whoever set that trap found and prosecuted to the fullest extent. This isn't just about one injured bobcat. It's about protecting the integrity of this entire ecosystem." Samantha agreed wholeheartedly. Illegal trapping threatened not only individual animals, but entire populations. In this region, bobcats were a vital part of the ecological balance, controlling rodent populations and maintaining the health of the forest community. Every illegal trap represented a potential disruption to that delicate system. "Get some rest. Today," Kent instructed, rising from his seat at the edge of her desk. "You've been up all night and I need you sharp." Take the evening shift instead and make those calls about the poaching case when you've had some sleep." Samantha nodded gratefully. The adrenaline that had carried her through the rescue and the long night at the wildlife center was fading, leaving bone-deep exhaustion in its wake. She finished her coffee, submitted the completed report, and headed to her small cabin on the ranger compound. Her quarters were modest but comfortable, a one-bedroom structure with a small kitchen living area and a covered porch that offered views of the surrounding forest. It was one of several similar cabins provided for permanent staff who needed to live on site, balancing practicality with the privilege of residing in one of the most beautiful landscapes in the country. As tired as she was, Samantha found herself drawn to the porch rather than immediately seeking her bed. The early morning light filtered through the tall pines, creating dappled patterns on the forest floor. Birds were beginning their day, their calls forming a complex symphony that echoed through the trees. This was why she had chosen this life, this connection to the natural world, the opportunity to protect something infinitely valuable. Her thoughts returned to the Bobcat kit, his desperate journey to find help, his unwavering focus on saving his mother. There was something profoundly moving about his determination, something that transcended simple instinct or survival mechanism. In those golden eyes, she had seen intelligence, purpose, and what humans might call love, though wildlife biologists would caution against such anthropomorphizing. Yet, after what she had witnessed, Samantha found the clinical, detached terminology of wildlife science inadequate to describe the kit's behavior. If love meant putting another's welfare above your own, displaying loyalty in the face of danger, and seeking help when you couldn't solve a problem alone, then what she had observed could be called nothing else. With these thoughts swirling in her mind, Samantha finally sought her bed, falling into a deep and dreamless sleep that lasted until mid-afternoon. When she awoke, the events of the previous day came rushing back with crystalline clarity. Despite the scientific rationalization that might explain the kit's behavior in terms of evolutionary adaptations or survival strategies, she knew she had witnessed something extraordinary, something that would change how she viewed the wild creatures under her protection. After a quick meal and shower, Samantha prepared for her evening shift. Before heading to the station, she made the calls about the poaching investigation. Sheriff Reyes was immediately interested in the case, confirming that they had documented several instances of illegal trapping in neighboring counties over the past month. "Sounds like the same operation," he told her. "They've been targeting predator species, bobcats, foxes, occasionally mountain lions, probably for the fur market. We've been coordinating with fish and wildlife, but haven't managed to catch anyone in the act yet." "The trap I found might provide forensic evidence," Samantha suggested. "It's been logged into our evidence storage. I'll send Deputy Harmon over tomorrow to collect it," Reyes promised. "He's leading our side of the investigation. And Samantha, good work finding that injured bobcat. Most would have died out there, without anyone ever knowing." After completing the call, Samantha headed to the ranger station for her shift briefing. The evening was typically quieter than day shifts, focusing on monitoring campsites, ensuring fire regulations were being followed, and occasionally assisting lost hikers. As she checked out her equipment and vehicle, her mind continued to drift back to the wildlife center and its recovering patients. Unable to resist, she made a quick call to Dr. Chen before beginning her patrol route. The veterinarian answered promptly, her voice reflecting professional satisfaction. "They're both doing remarkably well," she reported. "The mother's vital signs have stabilized. She's accepting fluids, and the wound looks clean with no signs of spreading infection. We've transitioned her from IV pain medication to oral, which she's taking with her food. Another good sign." "And the kit?" Samantha asked, the question revealing her particular concern for the brave little bobcat. Extraordinary, Dr. Chen replied, a note of genuine wonder in her voice. He's been staying close to his mother, grooming her, encouraging her to eat. We've documented behaviors that challenge several established theories about bobcat cognitive development. The research team is fascinated. The news lightened Samantha's heart as she began her evening patrol. The route took her near the ravine, where the rescue had occurred, and she found herself drawn to revisit the site. Parking at the nearest access point, she hiked the short distance to the ravine edge, then carefully descended to the creek bed below. The scene looked different in the golden evening light. Less desperate, more peaceful. The fallen cedar still bridged the small canyon, but without the injured bobcat beneath it, it was simply another natural feature of the forest landscape. Yet Samantha felt the significance of this place deeply. Here, human and wildlife worlds had intersected in a way that defied conventional understanding. Here, a tiny predator had demonstrated courage and determination that many humans would envy. She examined the ground where the trap had been, noting the disturbed earth and flattened vegetation where the mother bobcat had struggled. Anger flared again at the thought of the poachers responsible, individuals who viewed magnificent wild creatures as nothing more than commodities to be harvested for profit. As she climbed back up the ravine wall, Samantha noticed something she had missed during the intensity of the rescue. A crude hunting blind, constructed in a tree about 50 yards from the trap site. It was well hidden, visible only from certain angles, consisting of branches woven together to create a concealed observation platform. This wasn't just a randomly placed trap. Someone had been systematically hunting this area, probably using the blind to monitor their trapline. Samantha photographed the blind from multiple angles, adding these images to the evidence file. This discovery suggested the poacher might return to check their trap, providing a potential opportunity to catch them in the act. She radioed this information to the station, requesting additional patrols in the area over the coming days. The sun began to set, casting long shadows through the forest. Samantha continued her patrol with renewed purpose. The poaching case had become personal in a way that few wildlife crimes ever had. She had seen firsthand the suffering caused by these illegal activities, had witnessed the extraordinary lengths to which a kit had gone to save his mother from a human-made trap. Finding those responsible felt like a duty she owed not just to the forest she protected, but specifically to that remarkable kit. The week that followed established a new rhythm to Samantha's days. She performed her regular ranger duties with customary thoroughness, but added daily visits to the wildlife center whenever her schedule permitted. Each visit brought encouraging news about the bobcat's recovery. By the third day, the mother was alert enough to eat solid food independently and had begun tentatively testing her injured leg. The veterinary team had transitioned from critical care to rehabilitation, developing a treatment plan that would gradually strengthen the damaged leg without risking the surgical repairs. The kit continued to stay close to his mother, demonstrating remarkable awareness of her needs and limitations. When wildlife center staff approached for necessary medical checks, he would move aside but watch with intense focus, as if evaluating their intentions and techniques. His behavior toward humans remained a fascinating contradiction. Cautious with the center staff, but immediately relaxed whenever Samantha entered the recovery habitat. "He remembers you," Dr. Chen observed during one visit. "We've documented similar recognition capabilities in other predator species, but rarely with this level of specificity toward a particular human." On the law enforcement side, progress was slower but steady. Forensic examination of the trap had revealed partial fingerprints that were being processed through various databases. The hunting blind Samantha had discovered was being monitored, though the poacher had not yet returned to the site. Similar traps had been found and removed from neighboring sections of the forest, suggesting an organized operation rather than an isolated incident. On the morning of the 8th day after the rescue, Samantha received a call from Dr. Chen just as she was preparing to begin her patrol. "I thought you'd want to know immediately," the veterinarian said, an unmistakable note of excitement in her voice. "We've just completed a comprehensive assessment of the mother's recovery, and the results are better than we dared hope. The surgical repairs are holding beautifully, infection has been completely resolved, and she's regaining mobility faster than anticipated." Samantha felt a surge of joy at this news. What does that mean for their release prospects? If progress continues at this rate, we're looking at potential release within 5 to 6 weeks, Dr. Chen replied. "We'll transition them to our outdoor rehabilitation enclosure tomorrow, which will allow for more natural movement and environmental stimulation. It's designed to mimic forest conditions while still allowing for monitoring and intervention if needed." "That's wonderful news," Samantha said, genuine relief flooding through her. The possibility that the bobcats might become permanent captives had weighed on her more heavily than she had admitted, even to herself. The wild was their true home. Anything less would have felt like a failure of the rescue mission the kitty had initiated with such determination. "There's more," Dr. Chen continued. "We've been conducting cognitive assessments of the kit throughout this process, and the results are remarkable. His problem-solving abilities, memory, and social awareness are off the charts compared to other bobcat kits his age. The research team believes his experience, losing his mother, seeking human help, participating in her recovery, may have accelerated certain cognitive developments." "Is that good or bad for his release prospects?" Samantha asked, the practical question foremost in her mind, despite her fascination with the scientific implications. "Actually, it's potentially very positive," Dr. Chen explained. "He's demonstrating exactly the kind of adaptability and problem-solving that would serve him well in the wild. More importantly, he's maintained appropriate wariness of humans other than you. When we conduct the staff rotation, he immediately becomes more alert and defensive, exactly the response we want to see in a wild bobcat." The conversation left Samantha in high spirits as she began her patrol. The forest seemed especially vibrant that morning, the sunlight more golden, the birdsong more melodic, the wilderness more alive with possibility. The knowledge that the mother and kit might soon return to this landscape, healthy and free, filled her with profound satisfaction. Her patrol route that day took her through some of the most remote sections of her district, areas seldom visited by recreational hikers or campers. These pristine regions represented the heart of what she worked to protect, unspoiled wilderness where natural processes continued as they had for millennia before human intervention. As she navigated a particularly rugged trail, Samantha's radio crackled with an urgent message from the station. "Reed, this is base. Sheriff's Department just reported suspicious activity near the East Ridge, Access Road. Possible poaching operation in progress. Deputy Harmon is en route, but requesting ranger backup due to rough terrain." Samantha's pulse quickened. East Ridge was only about 2 miles from her current position, much closer than any other ranger on duty. "Copy that, base. I'm approximately 15 minutes from that location. We'll proceed directly and coordinate with Deputy Harmon upon arrival." "Use extreme caution, Reed," came the response. "Suspects may be armed. Observation only until sufficient. Backup arrives." "Understood. Reed out." Samantha adjusted her course immediately, moving with increased urgency while maintaining the silent movement techniques she had perfected over years in the backcountry. The possibility that these might be the same poachers responsible for the trap that had injured the mother bobcat fueled her determination, though professional discipline kept her focused on proper procedure rather than personal emotion. Reaching The coordinates provided by the Sheriff's Department, Samantha found Deputy Harmon already established in a concealed observation position overlooking a small clearing. He acknowledged her arrival with a nod, then pointed toward the activity below. Two men were visible in the clearing, unloading equipment from a mud-splattered pickup truck. Even from this distance, Samantha could identify several illegal traps. Among their gear, identical to the one that had nearly killed the mother bobcat. One man appeared to be consulting a map while the other began assembling the traps with practiced efficiency. "They've been setting up for about 20 minutes, Harmon whispered. "We've already documented enough for charges, but the sheriff wants to catch them with traps actually placed, if possible. More substantial case that way." Samantha nodded her understanding. Wildlife crimes were often difficult to prosecute successfully, with penalties sometimes frustratingly light compared to the ecological damage caused. Building the strongest possible case made sense from a law enforcement perspective. "Additional units are about 15 minutes out," Harmon continued. "We maintain observation until then coordinate the approach." They watched in silence as the poachers continued their preparations, occasionally taking photographs with telephoto lenses to document the illegal activity. Samantha felt a complex mixture of emotions: professional satisfaction at catching the criminals in the act, personal vindication for the bobcats she had helped save, and a deep sadness that humans would exploit magnificent wild creatures for quick profit. As the backup units arrived and took position for the coordinated arrest, Samantha found herself thinking of the remarkable Kit, who had defied every expectation to save his mother. His courage and determination stood in stark contrast to the callous disregard for life demonstrated by the poachers below. In a strange way, that tiny bobcat represented the better nature that humans sometimes failed to achieve: loyalty, perseverance, and the capacity to trust across boundaries when survival demanded it. The arrest itself was anticlimactic. The poachers, surrounded by law enforcement from multiple angles, surrendered without resistance. As they were handcuffed and led to the waiting patrol vehicles, Samantha experienced not triumph, but a quiet sense of justice served. These men would face consequences for their actions, and more importantly, other animals would be spared the suffering the mother bobcat had endured. Later that evening, as she completed the paperwork associated with the arrest, Samantha received another call from the Wildlife Center. Dr. Chen's voice conveyed professional excitement. "We've just moved them to the outdoor rehabilitation enclosure," she reported. "I thought you might like to know how they responded." "Absolutely," Samantha replied, setting aside her reports to focus on the call. The transition went even better than expected. The mother is navigating the more complex environment with increasing confidence, and the Kit, well, he's thriving. The natural setting seems to have activated instincts that were somewhat subdued in the indoor recovery habitat. He's displaying typical hunting behaviors, territorial marking, all the skills he'll need when they return to the wild. With perfect timing, the Kit launched himself forward, capturing the device with a precise pouncing motion that would one day translate to successful hunting. The mother bobcat observed from a nearby elevated perch, her attention focused entirely on her offspring's efforts. "She's still teaching him, even here," Samantha observed, noting how the mother's eyes tracked every aspect of the Kit's technique. "Exactly," Dr. Chen confirmed. "That's one of the most encouraging aspects of their recovery. The maternal teaching bond remains intact despite everything they've endured. She's continuing his education in hunting techniques, territory assessment, threat evaluation, all the skills he'll need when they return to the wild." The most fascinating development, from both scientific and personal perspectives, had been the evolution of the Kit's response to humans. While he maintained his extraordinary recognition of Samantha, often approaching the edge of the enclosure when she visited, He had developed appropriate wariness toward other humans, including the Wildlife Center staff. It's almost as if he's categorized humans into distinct groups, Dr. Chen explained. You represent safe human who helped, while the rest of us fall into potential threats to be watched carefully. From a rehabilitation standpoint, this is ideal. He hasn't generalized his trust in you to all humans, which would be dangerous for his survival after release. The legal case against the poachers had progressed steadily as well. The evidence collected during their arrest, combined with forensic matching of the trap that had injured the mother bobcat, had resulted in multiple felony charges. The district attorney was pursuing the case aggressively, using it as an opportunity to highlight the serious consequences of wildlife crimes. During a planning meeting for the eventual release, now tentatively scheduled for the following month, Samantha raised a question that had been increasingly on her mind. Where exactly will they be released? She asked Dr. Chen and the rehabilitation team's field coordinator, Marcus Wilson. Their original territory or somewhere new? Marcus, who specialized in release planning for rehabilitated predators, consulted his tablet where detailed maps of the national forest were displayed. Ideally, we return rehabilitated animals to their original territories whenever possible. Familiar hunting grounds, known water sources, established shelter sites. All these factors increase success rates post-release. He zoomed in on the map, highlighting the ravine area where the mother had been found. However, we have two complicating factors here. First, we know there was active poaching in this region, and despite the recent arrests, we can't be certain the entire operation has been dismantled. Second, during the mother's absence, another bobcat may have claimed portions of her territory. Bobcats are territorial, but their ranges often overlap, Dr. Chen added. Female territories particularly can have significant shared boundaries. The question is whether returning her to an area that might now be contested would place unnecessary stress on her during the critical post-release adjustment period. Marcus nodded agreement. We've been conducting camera trap surveys in both the original territory and several potential alternative release sites. The data suggests limited bobcat activity in the original territory, which is promising. No evidence of a new female establishing dominance in the area. What about the location itself? Samantha asked. Is there any concern about releasing them near where the traumatic event occurred? It was a question that reflected her growing understanding of the psychological aspects of wildlife rehabilitation. Not just physical recovery, but the potential for behavioral responses to past trauma. Dr. Chen considered this thoughtfully. It's a valid concern, though difficult to quantify in wild animals. We can't know how much geographic association the mother makes with her injury. That said, bobcats have excellent spatial memory and navigate primarily through territorial knowledge, rather than emotional response to locations. The events had challenged much of what she thought she understood about wildlife behavior and cognition. The kit's determination, his problem-solving, his trust in a specific human when trust made no evolutionary sense, all suggested capabilities that science was only beginning to properly document and understand. Beyond the academic implications, the experience had shifted something fundamental in how Samantha perceived her role as a protector of the wilderness. Each animal wasn't just a component of an ecosystem, but an individual with unique qualities, capabilities, and perhaps even emotional lives that humans had barely begun to comprehend. Dawn was just a faint promise on the eastern horizon when the release team assembled at the ranger station. The specialized transport vehicle had been prepared the night before, equipped with climate control and monitoring systems to ensure the bobcat's comfort during the journey. Dr. Chen supervised the loading process, checking each detail with meticulous attention. The location has been secured since midnight, Marcus informed the team during a brief orientation. No human activity permitted within a 1-mile radius to minimize disturbance. We'll approach from downwind, establish the release enclosure, then withdraw to the observation blind, approximately 200 yards away. Once everyone is in position, we'll open the release mechanism remotely. The drive to the release site took nearly an hour, navigating Forest Service roads that grew increasingly rough as they penetrated deeper into the wilderness. Throughout the journey, Samantha monitored the bobcats through the transport enclosure's observation panel. The mother remained calm but alert, aware that changes were occurring, but displaying none of the stress behaviors that might indicate distress. The kit followed his mother's lead, watchful but composed in the face of this new experience. As they arrived at the designated release area, the eastern sky had begun to lighten with the first pale colors of dawn. The location had been carefully selected, a small clearing surrounded by dense forest, with a creek nearby providing immediate access to water. Rocky outcroppings offered natural shelter and elevated observation points, while the varied vegetation suggested abundant small prey. The team worked with practiced efficiency, transferring the transport enclosure to its temporary position at the edge of the clearing. The release mechanism, a simple but reliable remote-controlled door system, was tested and confirmed operational. Within 20 minutes, everything was in place, and the team withdrew to the observation blind, a camouflage structure that would allow them to document the release without interfering with the bobcat's natural behavior. Inside the blind, an atmosphere of quiet anticipation settled over the team. Wildlife releases represented the culmination of rehabilitation efforts, the ultimate goal of returning animals to their natural existence. For Samantha, this particular release carried additional emotional weight, given her unique connection to these specific animals. Dr. Chen checked the monitoring equipment one final time, then glanced at each team member. "We're ready. Video documentation active, biometric tracking initiated, releasing now." With the press of a button, the door of the transport enclosure slid open silently, creating a portal between captivity and freedom. For several long moments, nothing happened. The team waited in expectant silence, breathing carefully controlled to minimize any sounds that might carry to the sensitive ears of the bobcats. Then, movement. The mother appeared first at the enclosure opening, her posture alert, head held high as she surveyed the surroundings with methodical attention. She paused at the threshold, testing the air with flared nostrils, ears pivoting to capture every sound of the forest awakening around them. The tracking collar was barely visible beneath her restored fur, the small transmitter positioned to cause minimal interference with her movement. Behind her, the kit remained just visible in the shadows of the enclosure, watching his mother's assessment of this new situation. His behavior continued to demonstrate the extraordinary awareness that had characterized him throughout, not rushing forward with youthful impulsivity, but waiting for his mother's judgment of potential threats or opportunities. After nearly 2 minutes of careful observation, the mother bobcat took her first steps into freedom. She moved with the fluid grace of a fully recovered predator, her previously injured leg supporting her weight with only the faintest indication of past trauma. She paused again after several yards, turning back toward the enclosure with what appeared to be expectation. The kit emerged next, his movements mirroring his mother's cautious approach. He stayed close to her as they ventured further into the clearing, their coordinated movements revealing the deep bond that had carried them through extraordinary circumstances. Together they crossed the open space, moving toward the shelter of the forest edge. At the boundary between clearing and wilderness, the mother paused once more, surveying the territory that awaited them. The kit pressed against her side, his small form vibrating with what might have been excitement or anxiety at this new chapter in their journey. Then, with sudden, decisive movement, the mother bobcat slipped into the forest, her tawny spotted coat immediately blending with the dappled shadows beneath the trees. The kit followed without hesitation, disappearing into the wilderness that was their birthright. Within seconds, both bobcats had vanished from view, becoming once more part of the secret life of the forest. In the observation blind, the team maintained respectful silence, allowing the significance of the moment to register fully. These animals, who had endured trauma, separation, and the strange world of human intervention, had now returned to the existence for which they were perfectly evolved. Whatever challenges awaited them in the wild, they would face as nature intended, on their own terms, with their own remarkable capabilities. Dr. Chen spoke first, her voice quiet, but carrying professional satisfaction. Textbook release. Strong. Movement. Appropriate environmental assessment. No signs of stress or disorientation. The tracking system is functioning perfectly. We're already receiving location data. Marcus nodded agreement. Mother's movement patterns suggest territorial recognition. She's heading northwest along what was likely an established travel corridor. Before her injury, the kit is maintaining perfect positioning relative to her lead. The technical observations continued, each team member contributing their professional assessment of the release's success. Samantha listened, adding occasional insights from her ranger's knowledge of the specific territory, but a part of her mind remained fixed on the personal significance of what she had just witnessed. The extraordinary journey that had begun with a desperate kit seeking human help had culminated in this moment of return. The circle had closed. Whatever human intervention had been necessary for their survival, the emergency first aid, the surgery, the rehabilitation, had now ended. The wild had reclaimed its own. As the team began packing their equipment, preparing to leave the bobcats, to their rediscovered freedom, Samantha found herself drawn to the edge of the clearing. The forest beyond stretched vast and elemental, harboring countless untold stories of survival, adaptation, and the complex dance of predator and prey. Somewhere in that green infinity, a mother bobcat and her remarkable kit were already reclaiming their place in the ancient patterns of the wild. Dr. Chen approached, standing beside Samantha in contemplative silence for a moment before speaking. It never gets old, does it? Watching them return where they belong. No, Samantha agreed. Especially not this time. The research team is already excited about the tracking data, Dr. Chen continued. They've set up a secure portal where the rehabilitation staff can monitor their movements. I've arranged for you to have access as well, given your unique connection to the case. Samantha nodded her appreciation, though she felt a curious reluctance about the tracking data. Part of her wanted to know that they were thriving, that the mother's recovered leg was serving her well in hunting and survival. Yet another part recognized that true wildness meant freedom from human observation and interference, even the well-intentioned kind. You're conflicted, Dr. Chen observed with professional insight. That's natural. The scientific value of monitoring, their reintegration is clear, but there's also beauty in simply trusting that they'll find their way without our continued surveillance. Exactly, Samantha acknowledged, though I admit I'll probably check those tracking data regularly, at least for a while. Dr. Chen smiled with understanding. Most of us will. This case has been special for everyone involved. The kit's actions challenged our understanding of bobcat cognition and behavior in ways that will influence wildlife rehabilitation protocols for years to come. As they walked back to the vehicles, the morning sun had fully cleared the eastern mountains, illuminating the forest with golden light. Birds called from the canopy, and the subtle movements of smaller wildlife resumed now that the human presence was withdrawing. The wilderness was reclaiming its natural rhythms, incorporating the returned bobcats into its complex tapestry of life. For Samantha, this moment represented both an ending and a beginning. The rescue story had reached its ideal conclusion with the bobcats' return to freedom. Yet the impact of the experience would continue to inform her work as a ranger, deepening her understanding of the remarkable creatures that shared the wilderness she protected. The kit, no longer the tiny, desperate figure that had followed her through the forest but growing into a young bobcat with extraordinary abilities, had gifted her with a perspective few humans ever received, a glimpse into the profound complexity of wild minds and hearts. His determination to save his mother, his trust in a specific human when trust defied instinct, his patience throughout the long process of rehabilitation, all challenged the comfortable boundaries humans often placed between themselves and other species. As the team departed, leaving the release site to return to its natural state, Samantha cast one last glance toward the forest where the bobcats had disappeared. Whatever the tracking data might reveal about their movements in the coming days and weeks, the most important truth was already evident. They were home, they were free, and they were wild once more, exactly as they were meant to be. The bobcat kit, who had once desperately followed a forest ranger, leading her to his injured mother and changing both their show, Lives Forever had completed his remarkable journey. In doing so, he had not only saved his mother, but had revealed something profound about the capacity for intelligence, adaptability, and perhaps even love that existed in the wild creatures humans too often underestimated. It was a lesson Samantha would carry with her through all her future days in the wilderness, a gift from a tiny predator with extraordinary courage and heart. 3 months passed since the bobcats returned to the wild. Summer had given way to autumn, painting the forest in brilliant hues of red, orange, and gold. The mountains had taken on the crisp, clear quality that made this Samantha's favorite season. Sharp blue skies contrasting with the fiery canopy, mornings touched with frost, and evenings that carried the first hints of winter's approach. Throughout this transition, Samantha had maintained her regular duties as a forest ranger while following the progress of the released bobcats through the tracking data. The information provided by the mother's collar had revealed a fascinating story of successful reintegration to wild existence. After an initial period of cautious exploration radiating outward from the release site, the mother had gradually reclaimed much of her original territory, establishing regular hunting routes and denning areas that suggested successful readaptation. Most encouragingly, the movement patterns showed no limitations from her previously injured leg. Her hunting ranges, travel speeds, and climbing activities all indicated complete functional recovery. Exactly the outcome the rehabilitation team had worked so diligently to achieve. The data revealed a predator, once again fully capable of thriving in her natural environment. Though the kit couldn't be directly tracked without his own collar, the mother's movements suggested he remained with her, learning and growing under her experienced guidance. Bobcat kits typically stayed with their mothers for up to 9 months before beginning to establish their own territories, and nothing in the tracking data suggested this natural pattern had been disrupted by their extraordinary experiences. The poaching case had progressed through the legal system with unexpected momentum. The extensive evidence, combined with public interest in the bobcat story, had resulted in the maximum penalties for the convicted poachers: substantial fines, equipment forfeiture, and jail sentences that sent a clear message about the seriousness of wildlife crimes. More importantly, the investigation had expanded to uncover a larger, illegal wildlife trafficking network, leading to additional arrests and the disruption of operations that had threatened multiple protected species throughout the region. Years of wilderness experience had honed Samantha's awareness to a fine edge. Without making sudden movements, she slowly straightened and scanned the surrounding forest, her senses alert for whatever had caused the change in atmosphere. Nothing immediately visible presented itself, but the silence persisted, a pocket of stillness amid the otherwise active forest. Following her intuition, Samantha moved carefully in the direction of the silence, maintaining the slow, deliberate pace. That minimized disturbance. She crossed the stream using exposed rocks as stepping stones, then navigated through a section of denser undergrowth, her movements calculated to create minimal sound. Beyond this thicket, the forest opened into a small natural clearing dotted with weathered boulders and bathed in dappled sunlight. There, poised atop one of the larger rocks, was a bobcat. Samantha froze, controlling her breathing to maintain absolute stillness. The bobcat hadn't yet noticed her, its attention focused intently on something at the base of the boulder, likely potential prey. From this distance, Samantha couldn't immediately determine if this was her bobcat, the mother she had helped rescue months ago. The angle and lighting made it difficult to see if the tracking collar was present beneath the thick neck fur. For nearly a minute, neither human nor bobcat moved. Then, with the lightning-fast reflection typical of its species, the bobcat launched. From the rock, pouncing on whatever had held its attention, there was a brief scuffle, barely visible through the tall grass, before the predator rose with what appeared to be a squirrel held firmly in its jaws. It was then that the bobcat finally registered Samantha's presence. Its head snapped up, golden eyes locking onto the human figure at the edge of the clearing. Samantha remained motionless, scarcely breathing as she met that intense gaze. In that moment of connection, she knew this was the mother bobcat, the same remarkable animal she had helped rescue from the ravine, had accompanied through surgery and rehabilitation, had watched return to the wild 3 months earlier. The certainty came not just from the barely visible collar beneath her fur, but from something in those eyes, a quality of recognition that transcended typical wildlife wariness. The bobcat made no move to flee, though she maintained a cautious distance, her prey still secured in her jaws. Instead, she simply observed Samantha with that steady, evaluating gaze that seemed to contain more awareness than most humans attributed to wild animals. Then, a movement at the edge of the clearing drew both their attention. From beneath the sheltering branches of a dense spruce emerged a second bobcat, noticeably smaller than the mother, but no longer the tiny kit Samantha had first encountered in the forest. He had grown significantly during the months of freedom, his body showing the lengthening limbs and more proportional features of adolescence. He moved with the natural confidence of a young predator learning his strength, approaching his mother with clear expectation of sharing her catch. The young bobcat paused when he noticed Samantha, his body immediately shifting to alert posture. Unlike his mother, his initial reaction was to retreat slightly, moving back toward the protective cover of the forest edge. Yet he didn't flee completely, instead watching with evident curiosity from his safer position. The mother responded to her offspring's caution by dropping the squirrel at her feet and making a soft vocalization, barely audible to Samantha, but clearly communicating something to the younger bobcat. She then picked up her prey again and turned, moving unhurriedly, toward the forest edge where her offspring waited. They disappeared together beneath the spruce boughs, melting into the dappled shadows with the effortless camouflage that made bobcats such successful forest predators. The entire encounter had lasted less than 2 minutes, yet Samantha stood, motionless for several moments afterward, processing what she had witnessed. This hadn't been merely a random sighting of a species she was familiar with. This had been a reunion, however brief, with specific animals whose journey had become intertwined with her own. The mother's lack of fear, her willingness to remain, visible rather than immediately fleeing as most wild bobcats would, suggested she retained some memory of Samantha as a non-threatening presence. As they packed their equipment and began the hike back, conversation flowed with renewed purpose and vision. The documentary would now have an ending no one could have scripted, a perfect closing to a story about the extraordinary capacity for healing, adaptation, and perhaps even memory in the wild creatures humans so often underestimated. For Samantha, the brief encounter represented something deeply personal, confirmation that her life's work protecting these mountains and their inhabitants truly mattered. That desperate kid who had once followed her through the snow, seeking help for his injured mother against all instinctual odds, had not just survived, but thrived. His legacy continued in the next generation, wild and free in the forests she had dedicated her life to protecting. The circle was complete. The painful truth that had driven a tiny bobcat to seek human help had transformed into something beautiful, a story of recovery, resilience, and the remarkable bonds that sometimes formed across the boundaries between wild and human worlds. 10 years later, Samantha stood at the podium of a prestigious conservation conference, the keynote speaker for an international summit on wildlife cognition and conservation ethics. Her hair now carried strands of silver earned through decades protecting the wilderness she loved. The boundaries we've drawn between human and animal consciousness have always been more about our limitations than theirs, she told the rapt audience of scientists, policymakers, and conservationists. What began with one remarkable bobcat kit has evolved into a revolution in how we understand, respect, and protect wild minds. The research sparked by the bobcat case had indeed transformed wildlife rehabilitation practices worldwide. Traditional protocols now incorporated understanding of emotional bonds between animals, recognizing problem-solving capabilities previously dismissed as anthropomorphic projection. Poaching penalties had been strengthened in 17 countries, directly influenced by the documentary that had reached over 30 million viewers. As Samantha concluded her address, the lights dimmed for a final video presentation. The footage began with the original rescue, then transitioned to trail camera clips documenting bobcat populations throughout the Cascade Range over the past decade. The audience watched in respectful silence as the data revealed something extraordinary. The territory where the rescue had occurred showed unusually stable bobcat family lineages with consistent passing of knowledge from generation to generation. The most remarkable footage had been captured just 3 months earlier. A female bobcat, likely a descendant of the original rescue, was filmed bringing her limping kit to the edge of a ranger station during a snowstorm. Instead of the desperate journey through miles of wilderness that her ancestor had undertaken, this mother seemed to know exactly where to find help. When the lights rose again, Samantha's expression reflected both professional satisfaction and personal wonder. We used to believe that only humans passed knowledge culturally rather than genetically. We were wrong. These bobcats have developed a localized tradition, knowledge passed through generations that humans can sometimes be trusted for help. Later, that evening, as Samantha walked alone through the Conservation Center's wildlife sanctuary, she paused at an enclosure housing a bobcat that couldn't be released due to permanent injuries. The elderly cat, one of the few that couldn't return to the wild, approached the fence with none of the fear typical of his species. The veterinary staff had named him Pioneer, though no one knew his true origins. He had been found injured, Near a highway 5 years earlier, already an older bobcat with a distinctive golden gaze that seemed to hold unusual depth. Though his DNA had never been tested against samples from the original rescue case, Samantha felt a certainty beyond. Science, when those eyes met hers. "You changed everything," she whispered, "not just for your mother, but for how we see all of you." Pioneer blinked slowly, a gesture cats reserve for those they trust completely. Then he turned and disappeared into his shelter, a wild being who had, in his younger days, perhaps crossed the boundaries between worlds to teach humans a lesson. In compassion they would never forget. Somewhere in the mountains, his descendants continued the legacy, wild and free, yet carrying an extraordinary inheritance, the knowledge that in moments of greatest need, sometimes the most unlikely connections become the bridge to survival. Sometimes, the painful truth becomes a gateway to something beautiful.